listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Love Your Life Show. I'm so excited that you're on this episode because I hear from so many of you that you feel stress and overwhelm and fear and anxiety around, drumroll, money, around our finances. All right. And I have an expert on the show today who is here to help us with this. So listen in. Mikelann Valterra is an author, speaker, and master money coach who helps women around the world rise above something called money fog that we're going to talk about today. And I just love her whole concept on this. She helps women transform their relationship with money and design their ideal life. For 25 years, Mikelann Valterra has been a thought leader in financial psychology. She's written, spoken, and been interviewed extensively on powerful, practical ways to reduce money anxiety and teaches effective methods for earning, saving, reducing debt, and managing money. She specifically talks about transitions in our life, sort of like going into an empty nest or divorce or some of the things that we face in our midlife period. So this episode, and she talks about parenting and what we can do as parents with money and with our kids to set them up for success. This interview is awesome. You're going to love it. Her new book, Rise Above the Money Fog, is now available online, and I will put it in the show notes at smbwell.com/317. Join me in welcoming Mikelann Valterra to the show. Hello and welcome to the show, Mikelann. I am so grateful to have you on the show. As we were saying right before we hit record, finances and money and fear around money is something that comes up consistently with my women. I actually have an online, like a free life audit for people, and there are 15 questions, and one of the questions is about finance. And they'll be like scoring really high on everything else, and then finance worry, finance stress, it's almost, they're like, well, of course I'm worried about finances, isn't everyone? So thank you for coming on the show and helping us.
Hello from Seattle. I am so jazzed. Yeah, this is such a great topic. I'm so glad you're bringing it to your listeners.
Yay. So what can you tell us a little bit about these women are reporting feeling stress and worry and overwhelm around money. Like, what is going on and how is money so emotional for us?
Yeah, boy, that's the perfect question. So I'm a money coach, which means that I work on both the practical and the emotional side of money, as opposed to a planner that does just investments, right? And so because I'm a financial coach and I'm also a financial therapist,
Mm.
I get a lot of people coming in the door with anxiety around money. And of course, it's the $1 million question. Why are we stressed around money? I'll say this, Susie, because I wrote this book on Rise Above the Money Fog. Men and women are equally in a money fog. Like men
Mhm.
absolutely suffer from the money fog just as much as women do. It may look different, we spend differently, but there's equal amounts of fog. The difference is that women tend to suffer from greater levels of financial anxiety
Mm.
than men do. And it's like, well, that's interesting. Why are women more stressed about money than
Mhm.
men? And oh my gosh, this is where we go deep down the rabbit hole, right? But I'll just throw out one reason, and we can unpack any of them. Is I'm in my 50s. I was not raised with a lot of conversation around money in my family of origin. And guess what? Neither were the vast majority of women in my age group. And there are plenty of men you and I know that would say, "Hey, me too. We didn't we didn't get
For
a lot of
sure.
financial education either." But we know, and all the studies back this up, that our parents talked to our brothers more
Mhm.
about money than they talk to us. So part of it is that gender piece. And part of it is just a lot of us were raised in families where it just wasn't okay to talk about money, period.
Yeah.
Whether we're growing up, boys or girls, it was handled behind closed doors. It was this huge belief that money should not be discussed. And
Mm.
yet, magically, what we're supposed to grow up and magically know how to handle this incredibly important thing, right? So when you're raised with not a lot of education or even just normalcy
Mhm.
around talking about this hugely important thing, it causes a lot of issues, but the biggest, most obvious thing it causes is money fog. We grow up and we go into a money fog for a lot of reasons that we can kind of keep going into.
Okay, so I definitely want to touch on that, but before we move on, I just want to, what's coming up for me is when you're saying like of this, not, it's sort of like secrecy, like let's not talk about money. I do have a lot of parents listening to this, and I find in myself, like a lot of parental discussion is around like, okay, how do we talk about sex? Like, how do we bring up sex with our kids? And like, we're sort of working on that. But it's fascinating that I find very similar mindsets to money. It's like, let's just like, it's something that's there, like that obviously, like someone had sex to have our kids in our life. Like it has happened.
Right.
Like sex is power,
It's a real
you know,
thing. It
and
happens.
money is here too, and I find a lot of parents, sort of like right now when we're recording this is summertime, and parents, some of them are sending their kids off to university, and it's like they're like, do I talk about, how much it
Mhm.
costs and allowance, and it's like this taboo thing. And so while I appreciate what you're saying, like in the past, that was our experience, I do want listeners to sort of just have an open mindset and being like, where am I still not talking? Like, where does it still feel uncomfortable to
Right.
say this and to bring it up and to just be like, money is a number. And I really appreciate you saying that you're a therapist too.
Well, what
It's a
what I
drama
would
you
would
bring to it.
yeah, it's huge, right? What I would add to what you're bringing up is that, I work with people a lot on, let's call it money personality, right? The
Mm,
psychology of money on top of all the practical, how do you actually look at, personal finance? And when I'm talking with people about their money story, a lot of times the first memories that people have around money conversations with their parents is about college.
mm,
And I got to say to all the parents listening, that's really late in the
yeah,
game
like
to
started early.
be talking about money with your kids. And so I think part of the question for all the parents listening is, how do we normalize talking about money from a very, very early age? And yeah, it's got to be age appropriate, of course,
Hmm.
but you don't want college costs to be the first time you talk with your kids
Hmm.
about money. And sometimes when people go, okay, I hear you, Michael, how do I do that? Right.
Yeah.
So if you've got younger kids, a great way to start bringing it up is working with kids, not about money, but about needs and wants, because that's the very beginning of talking about money with our children, is helping them discern, like, for example, holiday gifts,
Hmm.
right? Coming up with the good old Christmas list and then looking at, well, here's the things I really need, but here's the things I really want, and what's the difference?
Mm,
Helping young kids be able to save for
mm,
something that's age appropriate in a really short time frame
hmm.
is the perfect other place to start with young kids, because, if you're 5 or 6, you're not gonna set up a savings goal, for example, that's longer than maybe even a few weeks, right? Because that's like the rest of their life.
Hmm.
They're waiting to buy the Lego set. If you
Right.
set it out, they're 3 months away,
Yeah.
why are we bothered, So, but this is such a great place for parents to dive in, because many parents can imagine
Hmm.
this. Like, when you really start talking about it, they can imagine thinking about, helping little Johnny or little Brenda save half her allowance for a toy of their choice
Hmm.
3 or 4 weeks out. Like, it's the great, great, great place to start. And when parents are having those types of conversations earlier, it's easier to continue the conversation as people turn into, God forbid, teenagers,
Right. Well, I
right?
also appreciate what you're saying because it's like we're having that conversation, and part of what you're speaking to is maybe having parents stay in a little bit of discomfort. Like a kid,
Yeah,
wants a Lego set, or they want to give their schoolmate a gift, and yet they haven't done the saving of the allowance, and and so to have them have a consequence at an early age
right.
for that sets us up also. So when they're 15 and they're like, oh, I want a gift for this, it's like, okay, and do you have a job? Do you have like there's just a lot of this, like instead of us rushing to fix and soothe our kids' emotions, it is this slowing down and seeing that, setting them up with these habits at an early age, that you get an allowance, and are you spending it every cent the second it hits your, and giving them some practice with money, I think is
Mhm.
really helpful.
Well, I
Um,
think there's 2 big things in what you're bringing up. People often don't realize that delayed gratification is a learned skill.
mhm,
We think that you either have it or you don't. And some personalities are take to it better than others. I mean, there is a certain brain chemistry personality piece to it for sure. But we can actually teach our children delayed gratification. And so, like here in the States, so many kids and so many of your listeners are going to remember Toys R Us, which is kind of going
mhm.
out of business. But,
I know
most
it.
of us,
Yeah.
I know, I'm like, no, Toys R Us. So my son is now 24, but he remembers, going to Toys R Us. And I trained him very early because, oh my gosh, did he want, as of course any
Everything.
young kid would want, right? And for him, it was all about Legos. So I trained him very early. I had a list on my phone that was my son's name is Xander, Xander's wish list. And so when he would see things that he really wanted, he learned to come to me and go, Mom, I really want this. Can we put this on my list?
Mhm,
Because what kids want is they want to be seen and
mhm.
heard and acknowledged. And if I didn't say, let's just say, God forbid, I was distracted, it was always mom, 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 mom,
Right,
mom.
right.
But he wanted what he wanted on the list. So he knew it was there. We
Mhm,
could sit down later at home and look at all the things that he wanted on his list. Right. And I remember one time we were in Toys R Us and he saw another kid having a tantrum
mm,
about really wanted something and the parent said no.
mhm.
And Xander said, "Mom, why don't they just put that kid's toy on their wish list on their phone?
Right.
Why don't they just do that?"
Yeah.
Right? Because he was so used to it. And
Mhm.
so again, he was obviously really young, but that's such a great way to enter into the money conversation with kids. And it wasn't about even at a young age necessarily dollars. It
Mhm.
was about needs and wants. It was about being seen. It was about learning how to wait,
Well,
and
teaching the
then
habit of waiting, of that delayed
yeah, exactly.
gratification, that you
And
can
then
be
the
uncomfortable in
exactly.
the moment. Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah, and I think the flip side that you brought up is, are we okay as parents, doing, consequences?
Mhm.
I've talked to parents where when their kids get their first speeding ticket, now you're 17 years old, the worst thing you could do as a parent is bail your kid out and pay the
Yeah.
ticket.
Mhm.
But it's painful because we've got the money, we can do it. It's
Mhm.
really hard to see our kids struggling. I mean, obviously, I just had this conversation with a parent, so it's
Yeah.
fresh.
Right.
But to say, "Oh my gosh, that's so hard. Now, how are you going to find the money to pay for that ticket? Let's sit down and talk about it."
Mhm.
Very different conversation than bailing your kid out that creates a pattern.
Yeah, and I just like this is something that we can start early on, and it just because whether it's a speeding ticket or it's our 14-year-old saying like I want DoorDash tonight, and it's like okay, what kind of money do you have? And they're like none. I spent it all at the. And it's like all right, well that stinks for you. It's sitting in that letting them have the like again like oh bummer that you got the speed ticket. That's like how are you going to say maybe I can give you the money today, but what's your plan for paying it off? We're teaching them
Right,
these skills. So
right,
to
right.
just have money be more a part of the conversation. And as a parent, it might bring up some fear for them because of their past and that it wasn't talked about. But that's how we break generational patterns. And that's what my listeners are all about. I would
I
like,
love that, breaking
yeah,
generational
break those
patterns.
generate
It's
like,
so
okay,
cute.
so this one didn't happen for us, but let's do it differently. And I guess another
Absolutely.
thing that I love about your list on the phone is that you aren't limiting and saying no that's not possible for you, which is a message I got as a kid. It's like oh don't dream too big, Susie, like women don't make money. What you're saying is like no totally possible, like I bet you could earn the money. And so it's just not right now. So teaching that like they get to dream big and you get to sure you might even be able to have the whole Lego village someday but not
Well, right,
today. And I believe in
100%.
you. How are you going to earn it? What are you going to do? Where and let them get into that thinking
Well,
brain.
and I'll tell you and your listeners a really fun, kind of helpful takeaway around money that I was training him without telling him
Mhm.
is that the very first time that we see something that really catches our eye, like for me, I go to a festival and it's tango shoes. As you know, I'm a
Mm.
huge tango dancer.
Yeah.
I go to a festival, oh my God, tango shoes, right?
Yeah.
But if you scanned my brain at the moment of me seeing the shoes, the table of tango shoes, it's a dopamine hit. I
Yeah.
have this huge surge of yummy, yummy, positive,
I want it
feel good. I
now.
want it, right?
Yeah, feels so
And
urgent.
it's the same with my son and that poor kid crying in the aisle at Toys R Us all those
Yeah.
years ago, right? It's just these are normal, healthy brains, right? The
Mhm,
first time we see something that we really want that lights our fire, we get a positive hit in our brain. What is interesting is if you go back to the store the next day, the dopamine does not fire in your brain as much.
mhm.
Meaning we get that dopamine hit when something is new, exciting, or novel. And so if we can say, okay, I'm not going to tell myself I can't buy the new Italian leather boots I just saw at Nordstrom.
Mhm.
I'm going to come back tomorrow and look at them again.
Yeah.
But when you go back the next day, you tend to feel a lot more reasonable to yourself. You don't feel as
As
spendy
reactive
about
is
it.
right. I mean, it's why I'm sure people can remember, you do purchase something. Say you do get the Tango shoes or you do get the leather boots, and then as soon as you are unwrapping them, it's almost like the shine is worn off
Right.
versus sort of this like, okay, and being in a more proactive, calm brain. We aren't in that urgent dopamine, like, oh my God, I need this to fix this, that urgency. We're like, do I really, which of these shoes is helpful and more proactive? So teaching that to our kids, I love.
It's so true, and I remember at a big tango festival, I was in Portland, Oregon, I was just, like, high on shoes. Oh my god, there were so many, I just needed it I told
All
myself,
right.
I need all of
I
them,
need
right?
all of them
I
now,
need all of them, I
yesterday.
could make a case, So, but I also know enough to know I have a normal brain too, right?
Yeah,
So I convinced the vendor to take the 3 pairs, and these are bloody expensive shoes,
yeah.
right? To take the shoes and put them under the table, to save them for me
Mm,
for a couple hours,
yeah,
so I could just walk around and kinda cool my little brain off, right?
yeah,
And
yes,
then when I went back, I didn't feel so I mean, 'cause, it's almost like a drug,
it
right?
is. Yeah.
So and I bought 1 pair instead of 3 pairs, but
Mhm.
I felt really good about
Yeah,
what I did.
yeah. It's very much I do that with Amazon and my cart. I, like, put things in the cart and I get but then I have a rule and a boundary for myself that I only buy on Fridays, and so I'll go back on Friday
Yeah,
and I'm
that's
like,
brilliant.
"Oh," and, half the times I don't even click purchase of anything, but certainly even more than that, I'm, like, taking stuff out or like, my save for later is like
That is
but it's
brilliant
but what I
strategy.
like that you're speaking to and what listeners could take away from is that, like, where can we push, a little bit of a delay? Like, where can we work in a delay on that purchase? It's the same work we do, warriors, when we're talking about like resisting an urge to eat or resisting an urge to have that second glass of wine or resisting, like, it feels so, immediate and like, oh my God, I need it right now to survive in the moment. And it's like,
Mhm.
actually, maybe I can't wear 3 pairs of Tango shoes at once. So maybe
Right,
I'll go
right.
walk
Well
around.
I love it, and, your listeners and the people that you work with are very educated and sophisticated, and, so they've all heard the wait 24-hour rule, right? But
Mhm.
what's cool is helping them understand, well, why? What's
Right.
magic about that? And what's happening is it is a neurotransmitter in your brain that fires at half the level the
Mm,
second time you
mhm.
see whatever it is that's lighting your fire,
Yeah.
right? And so you just feel a lot more in control. It's why I always talk with my clients, like when people go on vacation, Susie, they spend a lot clothes shopping. And like, well,
Mhm.
they say,
Uh-huh.
well, it's because I've got time to, which is definitely true for me. I finally have time to shop.
Mhm.
But the other piece is if I'm on vacation, like in Palm Springs, by definition, every store I walk into is new to me.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
so,
So it's that
as
dopamine.
opposed to all the stores I go to in Seattle,
Mhm.
they don't really light my dopamine quite as
Right.
much, right? But
Well,
on
there's also
vacation,
that
everything
urgency on vacation, right? Because in Seattle, you can go back next week, whereas
right.
Palm Springs, you're like, "Oh my God, this is the only time." Like,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So can
Yeah.
you speak so we know for parents, so parents, let's start talking about money, throw it out there, be messy, just start talking and starting to, get just make it less scary to talk about and make it more. It is something that we need to live, money, and in the society that we're living in. And so let's just make it more common and to think about like how we could bring it up more at a younger age. Can you speak a little? You've mentioned money fog, and if my listeners have not heard of your brilliance around what fog means and all, can you speak a little more about money fog and where this idea and term came from?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, thank you for that. So, the question is, what is money fog? And the short answer is when people are vague about their money, when people are unclear. For example, do you know how much money you spend? Do you know how much money you need to live? Do you know how much money you need to earn? Do you know what you've got in investments or what you need? Right. So all of that sounds in a way, I mean, most of us don't, and it sounds very practical. But money fog is really about how we feel about the fact that we're unclear about our money.
Mhm.
And so fog actually stands for something, because I just think that's so cool.
I do too.
FOG. It stands for when we're in fear because we're unclear about our money, or when we feel overwhelmed because we're unclear about our money, or because we feel guilty,
Mhm.
right? So that's fear, overwhelm, and guilt. And it all comes from feeling it, it's all caused by being in a money fog,
Mhm.
being unclear. And one of my favorite questions when I'm asking people about, how do you know if you're in a money fog is, does money feel to you like a sacred tool to live your best life?
Mm.
And people go, "Well, that sounds a weird sounding question, but no, it doesn't sound like a sacred tool to me to lead my best life." And that's usually a sign that people are in a money fog. And
Mhm.
it's also just as true to say, do you know where you spend your money? That's a sign of fog too, right? But I love money as a sacred tool, because the point of money is to live your best life. It's
Mhm.
not just to amass money to have money,
Mhm.
right? That doesn't speak to most people, but it certainly doesn't speak to women. It's what do you do with money? And so if we're clear about our money, it opens up our vision.
Mm.
When people are in a money fog, Susie, I find that it shuts their vision down. That
Mhm.
when people are vague or feel foggy,
Mhm.
they don't dream as much about the future. They don't see possibilities as much.
Mhm.
It's really similar, which is, this obviously the metaphor to driving a car in the fog. If
Mm.
you're driving in the fog, like if any of your listeners have ever flown in and out of San Francisco airport,
Yep, I just did.
you've all been delayed at SFO because of fog, right? That place is
Mhm.
so foggy. And I used to live in San Francisco. So
Mm.
SFO is in outside of Daly City, which has got to be the foggiest, I swear to God, the foggiest little city in the United States is where SFO sits, right? So you drive around there and the fog is so thick that there's no vision for what's further down the road. You take all your energy to keep the car on the road and not hit anything in front of you. There's a stop sign telling you that there's going to be a stop sign.
Mhm.
There's a light telling you there's going to be, like, 'cause it's thick as pea soup, right?
Mhm.
And so when we're driving our money car in the money fog,
Mhm.
it takes all our energy to just not have a money accident. We're
Mhm.
tense. We're trying to keep our car on the road, but
Mhm.
there's no dreaming or visioning about what we could potentially do, for
Mhm.
example, in the next chapter of our life. There's
Mhm.
no, like, "Oh, I wonder if,"
Mm.
right? It's very shut down.
Well, I also imagine it's very, well, yeah. So what I'm hearing is it's like very like narrow and focused and reactive because it's like, oh, there's a stop sign. Oh, there's this,
Right.
and then yes, we can't dream. But I know for myself when I'm in a vague place with money, I really like the way you explain that. Like when I don't, sort of know, like I'm just spending or I'm just saving and I'm not really like, what am I saving for? Or what am I spending for? I'm
Right.
not even able to see the wider view of like, what might I possibly need to save for? Like, not only can I not see the good in front of me, I can't see the potential negative. So then we're constantly in this state of fear and overwhelm and guilt. So, you said, your one big question with how women can tell if they're in a money fog. What are some other ways people can tell if they're in a money fog?
I will ask people questions like, if you've ever wondered, where did it all go? That's a
Mm,
sign of being in a money fog, because people ask that all the time. They're like, wait, what? How did my credit card balance? We get these statements in the mail and we go,
yeah.
what? where did it all go? I mean, so
Mhm.
that when you hear
Like
yourself
confusion.
in shock
Mhm.
over something, usually it's the credit card bill, that's a sign of being in a money fog. If you feel fear around your money, again, all of those fear and anxiety, I would, if you've ever felt guilty about something you bought,
Mhm.
usually if you are feeling guilty about how much you spent when you went to Hawaii,
Mhm.
that is likely because you're in a money fog. You're like, I don't know if I could afford to go to Hawaii. I'm not sure. I get the question a lot as a coach, like, I don't know if I can afford to go to Hawaii because people
Mhm.
are in a fog,
Mhm.
right? So whenever they're not clear, can I do whatever this is? It's usually because you're in a money fog. I would say on a practical level, Susie, if you don't have a system
Mhm.
or tracking where you spend your money, that likely is a sign that you're in a money fog. And at the bigger level, if you don't know how much money you need to be saving in order to go work optional
Mhm.
when you want to be work optional, that's
Mhm.
also likely a sign of being in the money fog.
Mhm. So, okay, so I totally get this, and I appreciate how at the beginning of explaining what money fog is, you said most of us are in this because I think I like the last thing I want listeners to feel is like shame or shutdown because that's
Right.
the overwhelm,
Yeah.
and yet this, I definitely can see this like vagueness and this fear of like, oh my God, do I have the money to retire, or do I have the money to go
Right.
to Hawaii, and then that quickly leading to the O of money fog, of overwhelm. So how might a listener that's like, yeah, this is me, sure, how might a listener start to get out of this money fog?
Yeah, you're like, "Yeah, thanks for the I
Right?
knew
Yeah,
that, and now
that's
I know it
enough.
even
Like,
more," right? Yeah. Well, so it's a couple thoughts, and then I'll give them a real practical, way out. It's levels and degrees,
mhm,
right? There are times in our life where we're clearer than others.
mhm,
And sometimes what I know is that when people go through a transition in their life, probably the most common one I see is divorce. It
mhm,
tends to bring back up the fog. So sometimes your listeners might be like, well, why is the fog worse right now? Right
mm,
before, it's like, oh, yeah, sure, there was a little bit, but now it's particularly feels thicker than before. It might be because they just went through a big transition, like a divorce, or maybe empty nesting, or retiring, or,
mm.
moving to Australia. I mean, there's these
Yeah.
huge transitions that could be amazing and positive, but most of us are doing the best we can. We
Mhm,
get to the point where we feel like, yeah, I got this. My money that I spend is in alignment with the money that I earn. It's
mhm,
all good. And then transition happens and it kind of
mhm,
throws everything up in the air. So part of it is kind of where we are in our life.
mhm,
What I would say is a really great, like, okay, I get it. What do I do about it? Is I find that I start with having people practice elegant financial simplicity.
mhm,
And what I mean by that is, like, how can you beautify your money? I think, Susie, that most people have too many accounts.
mm,
And this is one of the things that causes a lot of money fog. And sometimes they've got a lot of accounts that are left over from maybe a relationship, or, again, a transition in their life. Banks make it too easy to
mhm,
open accounts. Like, I'll
mhm.
give you a new toaster oven if you open
Right.
up an account.
Oh, I need another toaster
I
oven.
n- I need another toaster oven, so why wouldn't I do that? Because it's 5 clicks on the internet. And sometimes people have a lot of like credit cards
Mm,
because they're trying to bucket. It's like, oh,
mm,
well, this credit
right.
card's a vacation. This credit card is for fun money or eating out, right? And because people are trying to get their arms around their money, right? But it works until it doesn't. In the end, what happens is you've got a lot of places to track and look at your money. And, you and I know how busy people are, and
Mhm.
women busier than anybody. So what seems like a good idea starts off that way, but eventually that's a lot of places to go to
I
look
mean, that
at and
leads
check.
right to the overwhelm. Like it
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm like, I got to go to 5 different online banking interfaces to look at this card and this card and this bank account and this. So, I'm a huge advocate for account simplification and really pruning, if you will, your account structure, because the fewer accounts you have, the more that's correlated to feeling peaceful
Mhm.
around money. And the fewer accounts you have, the more that's correlated to higher net worth. People
Mm,
that feel really great about their money and feel like they have enough, which is a subjective,
right,
term,
right.
right, tend to have a lot fewer accounts
Mm.
than people that have a lot of stress around money.
I mean, that makes sense because, again, like you were saying, one of the main ways out of money fog is to have a system or procedure, and one of the things I do on Friday, I have Finance Friday, so I just look at my accounts. And if I'm sitting down, if I know it's Finance Friday at 1 p.m. and I'm like, oh, and now I need to look at 40 different account
Oh my
statements,
gosh,
I'm going to really have an easy time talking myself out of that, feeling overwhelmed, fear, what
totally.
am I going to see, then guilt that I didn't do my Finance Friday. And it's another, and it just sort of ads on it sell. So I do appreciate that a lot. And I guess one of the things I just want to highlight for people again is that you said systems, and it is this, one of the things we know as a listener of this show is that, like, we need to do when we are making change. Maybe we've been in money fog for a while, or we've had a habit of not looking at our money and not, of being vague with money. When we're making a change, it feels uncomfortable. And so at first it's going to feel uncomfortable, and and one of the things we know is, like, feel the fear and do it anyway. Like, however we can sort of chunk it so we start looking at it. And I love your idea of simplicity, because I think, I've been studying this. I went through a divorce. I've been through empty nest. I luckily was raised with a father who normalized the stock market and trading for me. And so I sort of have a mindset of, it's not that hard. But I know many women are like, it's so complicated, it's so complex. And a lot of, the financial experts are served by us thinking it's complex and it's hard. And so I really like your message of, like, it's sort of this, like, keep it simple, sweetheart. Like, just, get in there. Maybe the first step for the listener right now is to look at it. Like, look at your accounts, look at the numbers, get in a habit. And that can be good enough for right now to just sort of let
Oh,
some
for
of the fog
sure.
dissipate.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some people, the next step is just writing down account balances. For some
Mm.
people, it might be listing out, well, what are the names of the credit cards I have?
Oh
And,
my gosh,
and how
I'm sorry.
much
Also, I
is
don't mean
on
to
them.
interrupt, to know the
Mhm.
passwords for them, because I know, I did go through a divorce and I was sort of the one who was in charge of finances, but I know many women that's like, like, they've been raised with that, like what you were saying, like, that's the brother's job, that's the husband's job. Like, we don't even know what our account login is to, our bank. So that could be a start. And if that feels scary to ask your husband for that, like, get on a coaching call, because it's, yeah,
It's huge. It's
like challenge.
so important because we have to take care of ourselves, right? And generally, if you're in a reasonably happy relationship, your beloved wants you to feel happy and safe
Mhm.
and secure, right? So if they're not into sharing that information with you, that's kind of an important thing to notice,
Mhm.
right? But generally our partners, they want our partnership in
Mhm.
this. Many people that are running the finances, whether it's the whoever it is in the relationship, often feel alone,
Yeah.
and so it's lovely to have someone like, "Oh, wait, we could actually talk about this."
Mhm. And it could just be an admission, like, that early on in the relationship, it's like, okay, you do this, I do that. And in the same
Right.
way, maybe the woman has the gendered role of, like, doing all the shopping, and she doesn't sit down and
Mm.
explain to her husband why she goes to Trader Joe's and Giant. But if he were to ask, it's like, oh, I'll tell you. And
Right,
so, like, so often it's like, just, we don't know. Like, open your mouth, ask. And then if they are reactive, that's something interesting to note.
right.
Um,
Well, and sometimes it's a renegotiation of roles, right?
mhm.
Because you're right, patterns get set up and ways of doing things get set up years and years ago in couples, and it probably works fine for, X
Right.
period of time. And again, transitions happen, maybe it's because you finally do empty nest or whatever it is. But you want to be able to look at things with fresh eyes, and it can also be very rejuvenating for a relationship,
Mhm.
for a couple to sit down and be able to look at their money together.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and bringing up the empty nest, because that makes sense. I'm a divorced woman, so this wasn't my situation with, but it would make sense that you go through, you sort of have the different roles and you do the different jobs in your relation, and then you get to empty nest, and it's like, oh, all my attention isn't towards raising the kids or working, and and now I have more and I'm realizing, as you said, money is a sacred tool for my future too, and I actually want to be more involved in that. So and then the freedom that would come, I'm a mom of sons, and so I really appreciate how you spoke to that men feel this fear and fog too, this
Right.
pressure um, of of needing to provide and needing to have it all, and like somehow it's like, oh, somehow they should know to be financially astute, whereas they have the same brain as us. And
Well, they do, and it's like I'll share a proud mama moment, because obviously I have a son, and it's always interesting when money coaches raise kids, like, oh,
yeah,
let's see if we
love
got it
that.
right. But my son called me the other day and said, "Mom, I want to talk about money. I want to talk through financing the car and the numbers, and I just need to kind of be able to talk about it.
Mm,
Do you have time?"
yeah.
Well, what a sweet
Why
thing,
don't you're like,
right?
oh yes, I do.
I know, right? And it's not that, and there is no single answer. It's just let's talk through it. Let's talk through interest rates. Let's talk through this. Da, 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 da. I mean, it's just a conversation, right? But you want to get to the point where your kids will talk with you about whatever. It's just as a sounding board, just like we all need that. When we're making financial decisions, we want to be able to have people to talk them over with. That's just normal human stuff. Wouldn't it be lovely if your kids felt comfortable coming to you and say, I think I kind of got in trouble with this credit card and I got to figure out a better way to do this. Can we talk about it?
Yeah,
Like
and
that's normal.
I mean, that's what it's like to just remember that money is neutral until we add meaning to it. And so it is that,
Yeah.
like, oh, I got in credit card debt. Well, what are we adding a layer of meaning that we're dumb and we're stupid and we should have known
Right.
better? That's not helpful. Or same with
No.
your son. I mean, just the fact that he came to you shows some openness and non-gendered thinking. Like he's not thinking I should know this just because I'm, a
Yeah.
man. He's like, oh, okay, I get to ask and be in that vulnerable place. Same thing goes with us in our adult relationships, that we get to ask, and maybe, if we're asking for the passwords to an account, or saying that we want to be more involved, or we want to look at our money and see, just feel a little more secure about our future, that, and say our husband gets defensive, it's like, okay, I get why maybe he's feeling that way, and let's continue the conversation, that it's a starting place, that if we want something to be different, let's do something differently. That really is, I really feel
It's true.
strongly that knowing about our money and our finances, it's part of us, it's part of our overall wellness. um I'm very appreciative of your time, and I am aware of you. I just would love it if you spoke for a second about money personalities. You had mentioned it and I wasn't sure, do you?
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that subject. Yeah. It's interesting. It is a very, very fun subject. In fact, I'm doing it's been so long with the pandemic. I'm doing my first in-person women's retreat on money personality and really understanding it to move into the next life purpose, for you, right? So
Yeah.
it's such exciting stuff. Money personality is really about what motivates you around money. And if you take kind of the top two basic personalities that people talk about, they talk about, are you a spender or are you a saver, for
Mhm.
example. Um, I don't really like that terminology because it makes it sound like it's a negative being a spender. And, so they're not, people don't
Uh,
have a good way of talking about it. It's really about what motivates you around money. Are you motivated by security or are you motivated by freedom?
mm,
And there's huge strengths that come with being motivated by freedom, right? I mean, you tend to be generous and living, enjoying your life. And, it's like, oh my gosh. And the challenge could be potentially overspending and debt, right? There's strengths and challenges to every personality. And so, I like to work with kind of four core money personality types. I would call it the liberty personality type, which tends to be motivated by freedom. And then the safe harbor personality type that tends to be motivated more by security. And
mm,
again, how beautiful. There is no bad money personality. We actually all have all
mhm,
types within us, right? The other thing I think that's interesting, Susie, is our money personality actually changes and shifts sometimes over time. For
Mm,
example, some people used to be more security oriented, and
mhm.
then many people go through I'm very, very, like I study a lot of Jungian psychology, and it doesn't matter what type of psychology you study.
Right.
We go through major developmental shifts in our 40s in
Mm,
particular, right? That's only now being studied. So many people shift their money personality motivations in their 40s. They
mm,
used to be super security oriented. Now they want more freedom.
mhm.
They used to be very freedom oriented. Nobody can tell me what to do with my money. Let's enjoy, 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 to wanting a little bit more security.
Mm, yeah,
Right.
that makes sense.
So what I often think is it's like Socrates, know thyself. There
Mhm,
is no bad money personality. They're all wonderful. They're all beautiful. You just want to know for you, what's your personality matrix around money? What motivates you around money? And that way you can go, okay, got it. And here's the challenges
mhm,
potentially for me. Here's my huge strengths that
mm,
I get in a different way that I can leverage to make money and grow my net worth. And, for me, ultimately, all this is connected to stepping more into your life purpose. You
mhm.
don't want money to be what blocks you from stepping into your purpose. That's where I get super excited about this.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and I guess it's like any aspect of ourselves, if we stray too far to one side, like the saving or the spending or the freedom or the liberty, that they're going to be challenged. Like in my life, I really like how you speak to that. I definitely was more of a saver, 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 and like fear for my kids and future and all of that. And
Right.
on too far to that one side was too restrictive and too like, hey, Susie, why don't we go out to a movie? Like that's not gonna, and but also too far to the other side is dangerous. You mentioned four. I heard you say Liberty and Safe Harbor. Were there two others or the two others for money
Yeah,
personality?
so there's 4 basic motivations that people have around money, and Vicky Collins did this work, gosh, oh my gosh, 20 or 30 years ago. So we're also potentially motivated by love or by power. And
Mm,
so I would call people that are really motivated by love the aid workers. The point of money is to give to
mm-hmm,
our family, our friends, our children, right? Um, if you're super motivated by power, that's often misunderstood. That's cause based. So I call those people the mission drivers, right?
mm,
And that's bringing your mission forth in the world. What's the point of money? To see your vision and mission through, whether you're the CEO of a company or whether you're Mother Teresa.
mm-hmm.
It's the point of money is what you do with it and really driving your mission forward in the world.
Oh, okay. I really appreciate that. I know listeners of this show, we've talked about money personalities before and sort of the saver and the spender. And
Mhm.
I said the martyr, which is I think what you're speaking of that love. Like a lot of us women thinking like, we don't deserve like, I
That'd
almost
be yeah,
charge
every
people
archetype
like,
has
well,
a
like,
shadow. I mean,
yeah,
every money type has a shadow, and the martyr is definitely the shadow of
mhm,
the aid worker.
the undercharging and the yeah,
Exactly.
I really well, so
Giving too
listeners.
much away,
Right.
giving all
Yeah,
your
and not
time
charging
away.
enough and we're not good enough. But yeah, so listeners, I think one thing is clear is that Mikelann has a wealth of no wealth, pun intended, of knowledge here for us to tap into. We are only
Mm.
tapping the surface with money fog, with life transitions, with money personalities, with money scripts, all of it. And so I will put all of her goodness in the show notes and where we can find information if you are in her area and you want to go to a live workshop or you want to, have her be your financial coach and therapist. I love it. I love it all.
Yeah, so I would say if people are not in the show notes, the best way is I've got clients all over the United States.
Mhm.
So go to Seattle Money Coach. That's where they can find everything. And I know you'll put that in the show notes. So thank you so much for that.
Okay.
And I think, if you go to Seattle Money Coach, I would just encourage people to book a free discovery call just to
You're
explore.
so generous with that. Yes.
Yeah, what would it be like to do money coaching with Mikelann? I mean, let's just explore it. Um, or the retreat that I'm going to do, Susie, in March of 2025. People are going to fly in from all over the United States.
Hmm.
So that's more about a deep dive into a weekend of really honing in on your life purpose by understanding your money personality.
Oh, I love that. Yes. And this will definitely air before March 2025. So
Yeah.
yay, like,
As soon as I
yes.
said that, I went, wait a minute, is this going to air before then? I
I
don't
know.
know.
Well, I was like, if you were like, it's in the next week, I'm like, oh no, but no, that's
No, no, no. It's like planning a wedding. Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
Oh yeah. Oh, wonderful, Mikelann. I'm so appreciative for your time and your help and helping our listeners just get those little steps that they can get out of the overwhelm. And my hope is that listeners will feel a little more empowered and positive about like, oh, okay, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could do that little step and just get started to get out of this money
It's a
trap that
journey,
a lot of
and you've got to honor where you are in the journey, and just know that you're exactly in the right place, and you're going to be in a different place in 5 years, and you're just on the money journey.
it's all okay. Thank you. This is lovely. Wonderful.